Welcome back to Restoring Sean, and today we are in episode 24, where we venture outside and start kicking rocks in the backyard. If you're new to the channel, I post a new video every Wednesday morning where I do some sort of a plunge into all of the work that went into restoring my second house, the ranch. All opinions are my own, never assume I have the correct answer, and did you know, I have read and reread Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell 5 times. And each time I reread it, I find new things and interpretations. You can watch the movie as well, which was a pretty good adaptation, all things considered, and the acting can, at many times, be heartbreakingly great. But that book, now that's just a great read. Let's get started. The backyard at the ranch was never gonna win any awards in the state that it was in when I bought it, all right? You wanna talk boring? It wins. Tired? It wins. Dry? It wins. The backyard of my California ranch probably looked great once upon a time, and if I had photographic evidence that supported that, I would be firing it off through this video blog at a rate that you could not comprehend, that would shock and probably appall you. But I don't. Instead, I have these listing photos. They show off an expanse of algae-stained decking that goes on forever, warped stairs leading to random stones in the grass, a big dumb shed that filled the entire side yard and blocked it off from the garage access, a fire pit that was mostly fine but wasn't level and didn't allow air inside when you were burning, so flames went out really quick, decaying wood garden trim around almost the entire length of fence, a very badly loved fence that was bending inward, and then, like, I don't know, you get it, right? You guys get it. The manor was an overgrown jungle, but the ranch was an undergrown wasteland. Anyway, my first summer, I didn't do a damn thing. Not a damn thing. Apart from mowing the grass, of course. I would lay at the end of my bed and watch the rabbits sitting on the deck in the morning. That's what I would do. And when fall came, I'd watch the trees that were nowhere near my property, full of sadness at that fact, by the way, because I love trees, but I could still enjoy the colors as they changed. There was a whole bunch of spearmint growing in the backyard, and toward the end of September, it was swarming with bumblebees, and I absolutely loved that, because if you know me, you know I have a little bit of a penchant for bees, especially the Chubbly bumble variety. I just said Chubbly. I'm gonna leave that in. When winter came, the early snow came, and I enjoyed that too, because at the time, I had all of these illusions of grandeur of what I would do to the backyard.
Is it snowing? Are you not going to talk now? Okay.
So yes, the backyard was boring and initially inspiring with all the possibilities that lay ahead, but then I got sick, and winter went on forever, and by the time spring came, my desire had been cut in half. But in the words of Gladys Lehman,
the show must go on.
When spring arrived and the mountains of snow in the backyard had mostly melted away, I went out to take photos and start truly thinking about what I was going to do to the area. Had money not been any consideration, I would have loved to build a great big pergola over the center of the deck, with a big outdoor sectional underneath it and a table with a fire pit on top, the kind that you don't actually burn things in, you just look at because it's pretty. I would have done pallet walls for vertical gardening and landscaped all around the big fire pit and the grass, but money was a consideration, and largely it would just be a facelift project back here. To kick it off, I borrowed a pressure washer from my friend and realtor, Chad, and went to work on cleaning the deck of the algae stains that plagued it. The deck had likely never been stained, but if it had worn off and away over the 15 or so years since it was installed. A couple of the boards were rotten, and I never replaced them. I just left them as they were. Except for in one area, now that I think of it, because it was big enough that your foot could go through it, so I did fix that. Anyway, I digress. Power washing is one of those things that is so calming and therapeutic to do, and you just put your AirPods in and go to town. I wish I'd thought to time-lapse the entire thing, but a few little glimpses are okay as well. I wanted to start with this project outside because I knew that if I didn't, the next projects were painting siding and the bricks, and I would be spraying algae and shit all over that stuff instead. At least this way, I could power wash the deck, then wash the house down from years of dust that had settled on the vinyl siding. I remember the day that I was doing this, I had left the gate on the opposite side of the backyard open. And I'm just going to town with my music, and I'm focused on the washer and doing my thing, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this figure come around the corner of the house. It was moving kind of fast and moving erratically, and it scared the shit out of me. And I turn, and it was my friend Renee, who, unbeknownst to me, but knownst to her, had ridden her bike over, and because the gate was open, she just rode through the gate and around the backyard and was just all over the place, all the uneven dirt. And I screamed, and she's just dying laughing, and she's laying on the deck, catching her breath, and she's telling me that she needs to ride home because she rode her bike too far. So we hung out for a little bit. I put her bike in the back of the truck and drove her home. That memory lives rent-free in my mind, mostly because of the laugh, but also because it always reminds me of Wayne's World.
Hi, Wayne.
After the washing was done and the deck had dried, I applied deck stain and a protectant in a walnut type colored finish because I just wanted a pretty basic brown outside. I had a couple of maintenance things to do as the weather continued to warm up, and one of them was refinishing the frame for the hammock that my cool neighbors at the manor had given me. After a couple coats of spray paint, it looked good as new, and I was able to start laying out in the backyard, soaking up those rays. But only before the neighbor kids next door got home from school. Otherwise, they were jumping on the trampoline like directly on the other side of the fence, and it was just too loud. And also, I didn't want them jumping on the trampoline and looking over the fence at me. So it was only before they were home. But when progress shifted to me working on the house itself, I started by staining the brickwork. I don't mind exposed brick, but there are good kinds of exposed brick and bad, and this was the bad. I didn't like how mottled the coloring was because to me, it just looked old in like a cheap way. No siding color was going to make that look good, so I figured I'd buy this H&C water-based stain from Menards that's made specifically for masonry and use it. There will be more on that in next week's video. The stuff was great, and it really gave new life to the stonework around the house in general, providing a great contrast and something new and bold where it had been so faded before. And speaking of bold, it was time for a new color for the house. I'll get more into this next week as well, but after some deliberation, the new color for the house was going to be Still Water by Sherwin-Williams. I love a good green-blue, and this fit the bill perfectly. Some of you might be confused as to how you can paint vinyl siding, but trust me, you can. There are specific paints made for it, and the dyeing process for the paints excludes any form of black ink, which is what would make your siding warp from the sunlight. And I'll talk about that more next week as well. For now, the color was going on and it was just this breath of fresh air. And I know I use that term a lot, but it really was. It was something you could look at and just breathe easily knowing that it looked great. I had to do a lot of cutting in around the house because while I now had a paint sprayer to do a lot of this for me, I didn't want any overspray to get on the finished brickwork or the soffits underneath the overhang of the house. One of the bigger projects in this was refinishing the chimney at the back of the ranch. This thing was not a normal chimney, as it was technically 3 of them combined. One on the left, I believe, came up from the fireplace in the basement. The middle was for the fireplace in the living room, and on the right was for the small fireplace that faced the outdoor area. Painting the lower portion was easy enough. I could reach it with no problem on my own 2 feet, but painting the rest was a little harder. I could paint the entire front of the thing while on my extending ladder, the rest happening early one morning when the sun was barely up because I didn't want to roast on the rooftop. I remember while I was up there working, Coffee, my neighbor, had started his slow cooker barbecue thing. I think it's called an egg. And I was up there for like 2 hours just smelling this thing cooking meat, and it was like the best smell in the world, and I was so hungry, and I had to fight, those intrusive thoughts of jumping the fence and taking it. Once the chimney was done, it looked like this monolith in the backyard and reminded me of the thing from 2001: A Space Odyssey. And again, if only I had the money to keep doing the projects in this area, it could have really been a cool space. That summer, I started tearing out the old wood garden trim, but only really doing this back corner randomly one afternoon and then calling it a day. My friend Andrew was also living with me by then, and he was asking if there was anything he could do to help while I was at work since he worked from home. So I said, yeah, you could finish pulling out the rest of the wood garden trim. I mentioned at the beginning of the season that there used to be a second shed around the back of the house, and I never took any pictures of it because I'm a moron. It was one of those super basic garden sheds from the 90s where it was like a 10 foot by 12 foot shed with a low roof that kind of peaked in the middle, and it had 2 metal sliding doors. Super simple. Like, it didn't even have a bottom, so it was built on a deck, in like a floating deck in the backyard. So there was no bottom to the thing, it was just 4 walls and a roof. It was butted up against on one side by that wood garden trim, and on the other this sort of like wood cage thing for strawberries.
Oh, look, a strawberry.
Oh, look, a strawberry.
So I was never going to use this thing, and because it absorbed such a huge amount of, real estate in the backyard, I wanted it gone. I put it up on Craigslist one day, hey, this is free, you disassemble it yourself, but it's yours, here's a few photos. I never list my address on Craigslist, which always throws me off when people do actually do that. I will drop a pin in my neighborhood, but never my actual address, and that's just so that people can know what distance they would actually be traveling and what general area the pickup's gonna be at. Right away, I had like a dozen people reach out. A couple of them were spam, but one guy was really nice, and I was comfortable with him, and comfortable enough with the idea of him being in my backyard for however long it was going to take this thing apart. I was working at Pottery Barn all day and told him that I would be home in the afternoon and I would send him my address at that point, which he was like, yep, that's cool, that works for me. So I get home and I see that the side gate is unlocked, which I think is weird, but I don't really think much more of it. It'd been raining all day, so I thought maybe it wasn't latched and it had blown open in the wind. This being the same gate that Renee had come Wicked Witch of the West riding her bike through. So I go inside and come to find out someone who saw my ad drove around the neighborhood where I dropped the pin. They must have seen the green roof for it that was above the fence line in the photos and in real life, obviously. Found my house, opened the gate, came in, and took it. They took it! I snapped this picture out the guest room window, and sorry in hindsight I didn't show this at the start of the season. I truly only found it a couple days ago. But that's the deck where the shed was. And it had these 2 weird desks inside, and then off to the left there was this giant black folding table that was in there too. And I was so angry about this. Not because it was gone and like I missed out on money, because I didn't ask for money, but it went against the order of events that I had in my mind of how this was supposed to shake out. So I had to email the other guy and apologize, and he understood and was cool with it. And it was probably him that came and took it anyway, but who knows. But still, who fucking does that? I don't think I'm alone in thinking that either. That takes nerve. So anyway, because the whole shed was gone, that meant the deck needed to be removed as well. And I told Andrew if he wanted to help, that was one of the things he could do as well. And then one day when I was working at Pottery Barn later in the afternoon, Andrew sent me this video.
The deck is no more, that wooden deck. That was this is a dirt pile. That was a fucking thing to pry up. There are all the remnants of it. Got that dug out, and the plant over there filled in. This is all excess dirt, and you can see I haven't even made the ground completely level yet. But I kind of evened out the rest of the area all the way down the fence. Like I said, it's not completely level yet. There's dirt pile number 2. Got all the weeds out of that one, or all the mint out of that. And then, yeah, it's been a lot of digging. Yeah, it's taken me this entire day to do. This is what I've been doing. I stopped to eat. That was about it. There are the pieces. I don't know what you want done with these. I know you said stack the wood beams in the back of the house. I'm not sure how you want them stacked.
Andrew has a habit of when I ask him to do something, he will end up going above and beyond. And I don't know if that's because he wants to, I doubt it, or if it's because I'm such a bitch about what my expectations are, and because he doesn't want to ask clarifying questions, he just does extra work so that I can't be disappointed in what was done. But I'm always thankful when he chips in, especially with landscaping projects, because he just goes to town. You can see in the background in that video that I had started painting the fence using my sprayer to coat it in my tried and true favorite, Iron Ore by Sherwin-Williams. The fence posts, not all but most, were painted light blue, and then the fence was in various stages of age and bleaching out from the sunlight. So the solid color really did a lot for anchoring it in the backyard. I spread grass seed all over the areas where the planters and the shed had been, and then by the next summer the new grass had actually come in pretty nicely. There was a sad thing that happened in the fall of 2021, and I do have to share it, else I wouldn't be doing the little fella justice if I didn't. Andrew and I were having drinks one night sitting on the deck with a bonfire going down in the grass, and all the cafe lights were on. Just a nice night to sit outside. And as we were chatting, I saw something like slithering through the grass down by the fire pit. So I got up to take a look, and it was a squirrel that was doing this kind of army crawl through the grass, not using its back legs. And immediately you could tell there was something wrong with it because it should not have been moving the way that it was. Eventually, it made it to the edge of the lower deck. The poor thing was trying to climb up so that it could get, I presume, to safety. So I went and got a piece of cardboard and used it to help lift his back legs, which were truly not working. We figured the little friend had either been attacked by a bird and injured when dropped, or fell out of a tree and was injured from falling. I didn't know for sure, but I thought maybe his lower back was broken and his back legs were paralyzed, but I didn't know that. So we just felt awful about it and figured animals can be resilient, so maybe he just needs rest and to kind of sleep it off, because he crawled over to the siding and the deck and dropped down in between them. The next day when I went outside to see if he was still there, he was down, hanging out for safety in there. And then a couple hours later, he was back on the deck, but not moving. I went outside and he was still breathing. So I told Andrew that if he hadn't moved or improved in, another hour, I would call someone and do something about this. But sure enough, an hour later, he was gone. I looked around the yard a little bit to see if he had just crawled a little bit further. I didn't see him. He was gone. Except a couple days after that, Andrew, I think, was mowing the lawn while I was at work and texted me to let me know that he found the squirrel, and he had just gone down kind of where the shed had been that was removed and was underneath the leaves of a plant, like a big peony plant, and he had died. And I just felt awful because I'd done nothing to help him. Not really. And I know it's just nature taking its course, but it's still sad. So I dug a hole in the corner of the fence, scooped the little guy up on a shovel, and then brought him over there and we buried him. Andrew said a few words, and that was the end of that story. But now you know, and I guess the new owner knows now too. But I think I told her that there's a squirrel buried back there. I don't know. Nothing else happened for landscaping, or at least not much. Andrew took a bunch of stepping stones that I'd gathered from around the property that were in dumb random spots and laid them out by the other shed because I wanted a path there. And this photo is from when he'd assembled them in place, getting ready to take the grass out. And then eventually I filled around them, or he did, with pea gravel. At one point that winter, the neighbor's fence blew down into the backyard, and we only found out about this because their dogs were up on the deck at the sliding glass doors. So there was like a windstorm and it was snowing, and Andrew and I went out there, and it was early in the morning, and we propped the fence back up, and then I just drilled small pieces of 2x4s against it. Technically it was her fence, and I was not going to be replacing it or making a permanent solution. That was on her to do. And this was the neighbor that never spoke to me anyway, so there. The following summer in 2022, literally nothing changed in the backyard. I just mowed the lawn, that was it. I guess there was a new gas grill that I had purchased that was back there, but that doesn't count. Winter came, and working from home, I got to appreciate the snow from this vantage point in a new way. Dislike the arborvitae as much as I did, they were still really pretty when they were full of snow. And holy crap, did it snow that winter. Look at this view of the deck from outside my bedroom sliding glass doors. That's a few feet of snow. And then it would melt and just stack back up. When January came around, the photographer marched all around the backyard through that snow, taking the listing photos for the ranch. With the snow covering everything, it wasn't so bad looking out there. I never enjoyed the view of the neighbor's house, and I never felt like I had any privacy back there. With the proper resources, I would have removed the lower portion of the decking entirely because it was just too much wood and it ate up way too much yard. I would have built new and wider steps on the main deck and probably added a railing as well to punch up the space. I would have added a window to the wall left of that orange grill that you can see, which would have been in the hallway outside of the guest bathroom just to get some more light in there. Interesting fact, there were actually no windows on the house that faced west. This photo is way around the other side of the house where the fence blew down and Renee flocked through the gate to scare me on her bike. That window on the right was the original guest room, at this point my office. It was a pretty decent backyard, all things considered, and this whole stretch looks totally different now, I know that. The trees are all gone and there are giant raised garden beds all down the middle with produce growing in them because the new owner has done just a really great job on this. And this was the front of the other shed. Walkway was done, but not very visible, obviously. I don't know what I would have done to this shed, probably just burned it down. You know me and fire. And that is all I've got for you right now. Thank you so much for watching today as we went through the backyard of the ranch. If you have any questions or comments on anything that you saw in the video, please feel free to drop them below. And while you're at it, go ahead and click the like button because it helps me out. And if you haven't already, click the subscribe button because it helps you out. That way you'll be reminded every Wednesday morning when a new video drops, such as next week when we go through the front yard of the ranch and wrap up all of the projects that were in store for me living at this house. Until then, take care and I'll see you soon.